Hello and welcome to Latika Takes, a podcast with me, Latika Berg. Hello, welcome back to the podcast. This week, I am back in beautiful Odesa in Ukraine, and it is just a joy of a city in the sunshine compared to February when I was here and it was ice central in the winter. Now, I've been attending the Black Sea Security Forum along with my next guest, Nico Lange. He previously advised the German Defence Minister. He's been a think tanker at Konrad Adenauer Foundation and part of the CDU, the ruling governing party in Germany. It's not necessarily that experience which we'll be drawing on today, although a little of that does come into the discussion as you were here. But Nico Lange is now the head of his own think tank, IRIS, the Institute for Risk Analysis and International Security. And he has been producing since the start of the full-scale invasion incredible reports about the state of the war. He has been visiting the frontline ever since the start of the full-scale invasion. He has lived in Russia and in Ukraine. He speaks fluent Russian and Ukrainian and is deeply trusted by those fighting this war for Ukraine's safety and, dare we say, Europe and the West's safety and security. So this is what I wanted to talk to him about today because, as you know, things have changed on the battlefield and for the better if you're a Ukrainian. Nico Lange, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Tell me, is Ukraine in a winning position?
It's difficult to say. It's a 4.5 years war now. We don't know if we are at the beginning, in the middle, or at the end of it. What I can say is that Ukraine has now momentum. It's in a better situation than it was a couple of months ago. And let's see if it can use the momentum to achieve more than it has achieved now. And the momentum is there both for the front lines, but also with the deep strikes into Russia.
So what's made the difference?
On the front lines, I think it is the meticulous work of the Ukrainian side to innovate permanently, especially with certain types of drones. And they have something like, in some areas of the front line in the south and in the east, it's like a double overweight. So Ukraine has drones that have a higher range, and they can extend the kill zone with a higher range, and that creates problems for the Russians. They cannot build their attacks like they used to build them. And the other part of the double overweight is Ukraine has a higher quantity of drones and can use a lot of drones to hold the Russian attacks back. And this shows. Ukraine, with this double overweight, decided to attack the building spring offensive by the Russians early. So the spring offensive is not really getting traction because they were attacked before they even could start moving. Russia will work through this and Russia will still advance, I believe. But for now, there is a momentum for Ukraine. And on the deep strike dimension, I think we see the results of months and months of work by the Ukrainians to take out radars, air surveillance radars, air defense radars, connections between radars. And now that Russian air defenses are at least partly blinded, Ukraine can fly drones into targets very far away and hit them basically at will. That is first and foremost the oil export terminals, which is, I think, one of the lifelines of the Russian financial system. But it also showed when Putin needed to ask Trump for help to have his parade in Moscow, because he has no instruments to prevent the Ukrainians from shooting into Moscow anymore.
Is this capability homegrown, and for how long has it been in the making?
Well, if you look at the geography, Russia is a huge country, and it was in the beginning a Russian advantage to encircle Ukraine from three sides and to be able to fire into Ukraine from different angles. But if you are Ukraine, that also means outside you can pick a lot of targets in Russia. You can fire into Russia into many different directions. And it's almost impossible to have dense, secure air defenses that will prevent this. And Ukraine now building large quantities of drones will keep this advantage. I think it will be very hard for Russia to deal with the Ukrainian drones.
I always thought that in this war, Russia had the advantage of scale. Does Ukraine have the advantage now?
Yeah, I think there are many mysteries about this war. I mean, the biggest mystery believing, oh, Russia is a big country and has more citizens than Ukraine, therefore Russia will win, which is a stupidity you still hear until this day from many. When it comes to scaling, yes, Russia is very good in freezing the state of development of a certain type of weapon system or drone and then scaling it up and producing lots of them. And this has helped Russia, it is still helping Russia with the famous Lancet drones or the Orlan drones and others. Ukraine has gotten better at scaling, and Ukraine is ahead of Russia when it comes to innovation in certain areas of weapon system development. And I think it's a combination. Yeah, as I said, a double overweight means higher reach and quantity. And for the deep strikes into Russia, I think we are still seeing the beginning of Ukrainian weapon systems that are elaborate so they can fly a couple of thousand kilometers. But the mass produced wave is still about to come. And Russia has no defenses for that.
Are you talking missiles or drones there?
Yeah, I mean, Ukraine has developed mainly drones, but there are some creatures there where you cannot really say, is it a drone or is it a missile? It's a mix between a drone and a cruise missile. I think Ukraine is not there yet when it comes to ballistic missiles, but is working on it, at least for the shorter ranges. And it's a continuum. So from mortars with a few kilometers reach over artillery, tube artillery, short range missiles until 2000 kilometer plus, I think Ukraine is developing now instruments for all distances.
I wonder if Trump coming onto the scene and being Trump and the way he has sought to be more friendly with Russia than we might have expected. Do you think that was a wake-up moment for Ukraine, that they really realised if they wanted long-range capability, this was something they had to do on their own?
Ukraine has been working on long-range capabilities for a long time. Some programs date back well before the full-scale invasion. They have been sped up, or Ukraine has, with ingenuity, found solutions for deep strikes. I think those things always went in parallel, developing Ukrainian capabilities and working with partners, including the US. Now that the US is not sure if it wants to be a partner of Ukraine anymore, it's, I think, reasonable for Ukraine to double down on the effort and not to expect anything. But for Ukraine, I think it's not only specifically about the US. I think for Ukraine, more and more, this is about rely on yourself, don't rely on the partners.
Which is smart, right? That is their only option at the end of the day because Russia doesn't move from where it is.
It's smart, but it's also a result of the disappointment in the partners in the US, but also in the European partners who do a lot of things, but never deliver enough, never have the decisive will to win, always put restrictions on stuff that are, from a military point of view, just absolutely insane. So, yeah, I mean, one of the reasons why Ukraine developed these long-range systems is when the artillery or tube artillery from the West in the beginning, they were restricted on not hitting Russian territory with this, which was ridiculous, but that was a reality they had to deal with. And the logical consequence is, okay, we do our own stuff now, and then we don't get this ridiculous restrictions on it.
Why do you think those restrictions were ever put in place?
Because politicians do not accept the military logic. And because I think this generation of politicians in the West is almost refusing to look on the map and into the military reality. And I mean, if you look on the map, you understand Kharkiv is on the other side of the Russian border and they can shoot from Russia into Kharkiv. And of course, to defend Kharkiv, you need to shoot into Russia. And Western politicians unable to accept this super simple military logic, it says something that they do not believe in military action and in military logic at all. They have the feeling, oh, we can discuss the war somewhere. We can debate the war into some state.
Now you're talking like a European, Nico.
But it's still the problem until today that you have this absolutely nonsense behavior of the Western partners of Ukraine. And if you look at the achievements we are now talking about on the front line, but also with deep strikes into Russia. Ukraine did the biggest achievements and produced dilemmas for the Russian side with things where the Western partners said, don't do it. Yeah, the Western partners said, don't hit Crimea. I don't know, the end of the world will come if you hit Crimea. The Ukrainians hit Crimea, they hit the headquarters of the Black Sea Fleet, and it posed a dilemma for Putin in the Black Sea area until today. The Western partners said, oh, don't shoot into Russia, don't incur into Russia. The Ukrainians did both of that, and it produced great problems for Russia. The German government, is refusing to deliver Taurus with the argument, oh, they could shoot into Moscow. What Ukraine is doing with their long-range capabilities, they are hitting the weapons factories that are important for the Russian ballistic missile program. And they are doing us a favor because we also do not have ballistic missile defense. Yeah, so, if you can give the Ukrainians an advice, is just don't listen to the ridiculous restrictions that are imposed to you by the Western partners.
Okay, I want to put this theory to you. Maybe the West doesn't really want Ukraine to win.
Yeah, I think they did not think this through. I think the very naive approach by politicians, for example, in my country, Germany, is we help Ukraine, and then somehow this thing sorts itself out because Putin gives up, or because he gets busy with other stuff, or because, I don't know, Santa Claus is coming and bringing peace, yeah? Or we call daddy, and who is doing this for us? So it's not only...
Or there was the possibility
I think it's not a
that
deliberate...
nuclear weapons might be...
I think it's not a deliberate strategy. Oh, we keep this going, so Ukraine buys out time, but we do not really want Ukraine to win. I think this would give them too much credit for having a strategy, because there is no strategy in this. I think what it really is never allowing yourself the thought, in order to end this, you have to beat Russia. That's the only way. They somehow believe that it can be done by supporting Ukraine without beating Russia. But that's, of course, not possible. It's a war.
What does beating Russia look like?
Increase the bredouille on the... It's a very... I like the word from military history, to create a bredouille on the other side.
What does this word mean? I'm unfamiliar with it.
It means you force your enemy into difficult decisions. In order to force your enemy into difficult decisions, you have to find vulnerable points and hit them, like Ukraine does with the oil export terminals. But also, I think beating the Russian forces that are on territory of Ukraine now is possible. It's a militarily solvable task. And then it will create a dilemma for Putin to create a new expedition force to go to Ukraine, or to accept the defeat in Ukraine. It's possible to beat Russia. And it's just not fair to compare this with Napoleon and Hitler and say nobody can ever march to Moscow, because it's not about marching to Moscow. It's about beating the armed forces of Russia on the territory of Ukraine, and it's about producing dilemmas for Putin so that he has to face difficult decisions, because that's the only way where you can at least either push him back or even have a conversation with him about a reasonable end to the war. Otherwise, he will just continue.
And if we were where we are now, using the capabilities that Ukraine has now, and you would understand are coming online, some of those I'm sure you can't share, how long do you think it would take to beat Russia?
Nothing is fast anymore in this war. I think already after a couple of weeks, it was clear that this would be a long war. Now every progress is small. The other side is catching up quickly. So that's why I'm saying we don't know. Even after 4 years, we don't know if we are still at the beginning of it, in the middle, or close to the end. I think a final end to the war is only possible if Putin is not there anymore. But it's possible to stop Russia and to contain Russia until then. Ukraine, I think, with the innovation and with the technological development on the front lines, I think can bring everything on the front lines into a standstill. We are very close to that. This spring offensive by Russia, it might destroy the city of Konstantinivka, but Russia will not achieve much by it. It's now the 3rd or 4th year in a row where Russia is basically not advancing. So I think we are not very, very far away from a kill zone that basically means there is a standstill. And then what you need, I think, is to increase the pain on Russia with the deep strikes into Russia, that there is pressure in Russia to talk about a sectoral ceasefire, not to deep strike each other's territory anymore. Then you might have a low-level conflict in the east of Ukraine, but you have a sectoral ceasefire, and then you can move on. I do not believe in big deals. I do not believe in summits where there is this kind of show signing of peace agreements. I think that's not the situation we are facing.
So it could be an incremental peace almost.
No, or it could be eternal war at a very low level that enables both sides to move on, to have economic activity, to go on with their lives. This whole peace deal logic is a dream that is ignoring who Putin is and what Putin wants. It's not possible to have this kind of deal that everybody seems to desire with Vladimir Putin.
You've been going to the front line, I think, since the start of the war, the full-scale invasion. Can you describe how the battlefield has changed as you have seen it personally and where it stands today?
Yeah, this war is constantly evolving. It's difficult to describe this, but there have been different phases that I have been observing. There has been a phase with high mobility in the beginning, where the Ukrainian defense was very decentralized and where it was about this kind of going away, making yourself liquid, and then hitting the large Russian formations and hitting the logistics tail. So they run out of ammunition and out of fuel, and then they have to withdraw. After that, I think there was a phase where Russia was advancing quite successfully, maybe not at the speed they intended in the beginning, but quite successfully with reverting back to basically a version of Soviet warfare from the Second World War, with this artillery firewall moving on and Ukraine not having enough protected mobility. It was very difficult for Ukraine to handle this artillery overmatch. That changed because Ukraine worked on it, also taking out artillery pieces, developing more artillery pieces. Remember the discussion about 1 million artillery rounds delivered by the Europeans that were first not delivered, but now there is basically this artillery ammunition problem is better now. So Ukraine matched the artillery capabilities, got better in taking out Russian artillery. And I think after that it changed into drone warfare. Until then, it was infantry and artillery and armored vehicles. Now, when you are, it's already for a long time now, when you are near the kill zone, I mean, if you see a vehicle moving there, it's like an special event. Nothing is moving there. Everything gets killed by drones immediately. Everybody is seen. You have some small groups of soldiers attacking, and then everybody is killed by drones. Everybody who moves vehicles will be hit by drones immediately. No element of surprise. It's a very dire situation. Some people always compare this to trench warfare, but that's maybe because all we have in our mind as comparisons is the black and white documentaries from First and Second World War. Something totally different. The absolute brutality of no place to hide, being hit by a drone if you are longer in the same place for than 3-4 minutes. And this third dimension, I mean, ground warfare was about maybe artillery, but it was about going forward, fighting the enemy. Now you are killed from the top or from behind, and it's a very dire situation in the kill zone. And I mean, there are things that are done that only a short time ago would have been considered ethically highly questionable.
Like what?
Now, for example, drones that are, because of the electronic warfare, are navigating the last mile to the target absolutely autonomously. There's no human in the loop anymore. The drone is flying into the area, and then it has a picture or some form of identification of the target, and then it kills the target. And I remember not so long ago where in Western countries we had discussions, is this allowed? Can we do this? We need a human in the loop. Does the drone operator have to be close to the battlefield, or can he be somewhere else? All those ethical discussions, they are kind of proven wrong by the reality of war, because the reality of this war is kill or be killed. There is no room for this on the Ukrainian side. Everything I learned in the last 4 years, every commercial technology, every method, everything that is available will be militarized and used for the war to produce an advantage. And ethical considerations that we had in the West of certain types of weapon systems, in reality, they do not play a role.
There's a gamification that goes on in the Ukrainian system where drone pilots are incentivized and rewarded, and their units are sent certain levels of supplies if they kill X amount. Some people say put the ethics of that aside. Some people have said that this is actually a perverse incentive because it actually discourages risk taking. Do you see this?
I'm not a big fan of those methods in general. One of the advantages of this war on the Ukrainian side has always been the flexibility and autonomy of many commanders on the ground of making their own decision and not following goals from the top. And it would be a pity if this is transformed into this kind of killing by quota to follow orders from the top. It's better to have independent decision making with the commanders to do whatever is best to protect their people and to hurt the enemy. What I like as a military person is the absolute blunt openness of what this is about. Because the only chance for Ukraine to prevail and to keep the advantage is to increase lethality. And it sounds super brutal if the Minister of Defense says we are killing 30,000 Russians now per month, we have to kill 50,000. But I think it's a legitimate argument how to end this war. You have to increase lethality. It's also a lesson for everybody in NATO. We have to focus on doctrine, on structure, on training, and on technology for our armed forces that have a much higher lethality than what we are doing now. Because otherwise, against an enemy who is ready to throw 800,000, 1,500 of its own people away every day, that's the only way to prevail.
If the battlefield is moving so fast and these innovations are at warp speed, as you and others have described in the past on this podcast, how do governments like us not in warfare, how do we apply these lessons? Because we can't invest in platforms that are going to be redundant or even being redundant on the battlefield in 4 or 6 weeks' time. So what are the lessons and what are the investments required to get us ready?
Well, I have two thoughts. Before I answer, I have two thoughts. One is, I find it highly cynical that everybody from Western countries is coming to Ukraine and is praising the Ukrainians. Oh, we can learn so much from you. So what is the idea here? The Ukrainians are dying slowly and we can at least learn some lessons from them dying. Let's help them winning. Let's help them winning and not give the impression, well, you fight as long as you can and then we have learned the lesson and then we start the real defense. It's a cynical position. And the second element when it comes to lessons learned, I mean, you say it like this, we can't invest into obsolete platforms. We are doing this all the time because military planning and procurement and approach to technology, by and large, if you look into European NATO members, it did not change much during the last 4 years. It's the same people, the same structures, just with more money. And it's puzzling to me. Yeah, if I see the reality on the Ukrainian battlefield and then I go back and I tell people, look, your mechanized infantry brigade will not survive half an hour. But there is a lot of arrogance still on the Western side. Oh, if we fight the Russians, then we fight it totally differently. And then it would be different. And NATO would be different than Ukraine. And I would be very, very modest about this. There are some fundamental changes. The mass use of drones and the bad economy of drone, air, and missile defense, I think, is just one of the problems. The use of electronic warfare and the role of warfare in the electromagnetic spectrum in general is highly developed now, would create, I mean, many of our electronic systems would not work. Like our GPS-guided ammunitions are not working anymore. What are we thinking about this, yeah? I think it needs more radical change. I see it somewhere implemented. I mean, the new chief of the German army is now implementing Ukrainian trainers, is getting its own innovation unit there. So sometimes it's individuals who have experiences in Ukraine who bring more innovation to this. But by and large, I would say much money is wasted for industrial reasons or because the good old prime companies are very good with the political system. And the lessons of how to beat Russia are not implemented enough into our doctrine, our training, and our equipment. But maybe as a last sentence to that, I think it's a big misunderstanding we have in the West that defense readiness is about buying things. We have this discussion, it's about spending money and it's about buying stuff. But the Ukrainians I talked to on the battlefield, they would always say training, training, training. It's the people, it's the training, it's the knowledge of the people. Yeah, of course they need mass-produced drones and all of that. But I think it's an overlooked point, and we have to be, I think, honest also to our societies. Because we spend a lot of money and buy a lot of stuff, it does not mean that we are ready.
You're a former advisor to the German government. Can you explain why the Germans, I mean, now obviously the Germans are spending the most on Ukraine, but what was the reason for why they failed and struggled to understand what was at stake here?
No, I mean, I was fighting against this also in my time in government. And I saw from the inside what the obstacles are. And it's more an emotional point, but I think it's important. I speak fluent Russian. I have lived in Russia. I follow Putin for 25 years. And while I was working in the government, I hire people in the government who do not speak Russian, who do not know Russia. They explain to me what Putin is and how Russia works. And this type of German ignorance, I think it still exists today, but it's a huge part of the problem. It's not only Germany. I think that is also, you can also see that in many other countries in Europe. So I think if you want to have a more political formulation, I think it is Germany did not accept the right positions by the Scandinavians, the Central Eastern Europeans, when it came to Russia. Germany insisted it knew better about Russia. But the Scandinavians, the Central Eastern Europeans, they were right and Germany was wrong. And now I think it's important not only to draw the lessons, but to keep the lessons, because in Germany there is this tendency, and Putin is inviting this tendency over and over again, to again come up with some new ideas of how to make peace with Putin or how to deal with Russia over the heads of the Central Eastern Europeans and the Scandinavians. I mean, why is Putin suggesting Gerhard Schröder as an intermediary? It's exactly the same thing.
For the benefit of those who don't know who Schröder is, just quickly explain his behavior towards Russia.
Gerhard Schröder is a chancellor of Germany who has his merits as a chancellor, especially when it comes to labor market and economic reforms that were very important to Germany, but who, to tell the story short, sold his soul to Russia, made a very pro-Russian foreign policy, and later worked for Russian state companies, is friends with Putin.
Textbook stuff, right?
So he is an embarrassment to Germany now.
Okay, so who should negotiate with Putin on behalf of Europe? Is it Angela
Nobody.
Merkel?
I mean, why? Is there an issue we have to solve here? We do not need an intermediary. What do we need an intermediary for? We have elected governments in European countries. So, I mean, the negotiations can only happen between Ukraine and Russia anyway. There's nothing to negotiate between the Europeans and Russia. On what? To negotiate on Ukraine and tell Ukraine what has to happen? I mean, Putin, by saying intermediary, he means I need somebody to go to Ukraine and tell the Ukrainians they should give up. So a European Witkov, if you want to say so. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's the same thing. I mean, Witkov was never in Ukraine. In his whole time working on this issue, he did not travel to Ukraine a single time. So what kind of mediator are we talking about? This is ridiculous. I mean, if Putin wants to negotiate with Zelensky, I'm sure the European governments can help with that or can be partners in that. But we do not need an intermediary between who and why.
So fight on.
I think it's not an alternative. I mean, the idea, we have an intermediary, now the fighting stops. I mean, that's a rookie idea. For Putin, negotiating means talking and fighting all the time, and he's negotiating to win. Yeah, even when the whole kabuki went on with Witkov and Trump and all of that last year, Ukraine was ready for unconditional ceasefire all of the time. Putin never was ready for a ceasefire. So for him, not for my naive friends from Germany who are always saying, oh, if there's diplomacy, there's no fighting. I think in Putin's world, it goes very well together. You can talk and at the same time you fight, and he used the talks to win.
Do you think America will solve this war or not?
No, I think we can forget about America now. I mean, on the one hand, I'm a bit relieved that this useless negotiation theater is over, because it was painful to watch, because everybody was just taking part not to offend Trump, and Trump had this idea, oh, we make a big deal and so on. And then the Ukrainians and the Russians and even the Europeans, they played along with this because nobody wanted to say something negative to Trump. But the result is zero. The result was asking Ukraine for the 1000th time, oh, will you give up Donbass? And Ukraine said, no, we don't. And that's all we achieved with all of this. Imagine how many summits, how many meetings for absolutely nothing. So it's, on the one hand, it's good that it's over. On the other hand, it poses the question how to bring Ukraine into a negotiation position, because one of the ideas in this Trump negotiation theater was we play along with him, we are friendly with him, and then at some point he gets angry at Putin, and then he pushes Putin, and then we will have a ceasefire. But I think we can start with the assumption Trump will never get angry at Putin. So how are we getting angry at Putin and pushing him into ceasefire is the relevant question.
And why do you think Trump will never get angry at Putin?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm a little bit tired of Trump watching and of everything that entails Trump watching. But it seems Trump has a kind of romantic relationship with Vladimir Putin. And every time Putin says something to him, he finds it very important and very smart. He also believes everything that Putin says to him. I don't know. Maybe Putin won his heart. I don't know why. Maybe there's something else going on, but it's ridiculous. I mean, everybody knows Trump can only ask his experts, if there are some left in his administration, about the battlefield situation. Which is that Russia has problems. But when Trump calls to Putin, Putin says, look, I'm advancing and Ukraine has to take a deal now because it will only get worse. And then Trump comes out of the phone call and just repeats what Putin says. But he can ask his own American intelligence services about the real situation. But he believes Putin more than his own intelligence services. So, yeah, maybe it's love.
Okay, well, I've heard a lot of opinions about you, Nico Lange, but never a comedian. But I'm glad you've made me laugh. Final question. Ukraine is not going to join the European Union or NATO, is it?
Well, I don't know. I think we have an absolute dishonest European Union expansion policy by the major governments involved, who are telling countries they are candidates and they can become members of the European Union, but domestically they are telling everybody, no, we don't let anybody in, and don't worry, it will take a long time.
Including your native Germany.
Yes, Germany, I think, is at the forefront of this dishonest EU expansion policy. That concerns Turkey, that concerns the Western Balkans, but that also concerns Ukraine. So one way forward would be to be more honest about EU expansion policy. Is this a geostrategic project? Then we have to find ways of expanding without this technocratic preferences. Or is it not? But then we have to be honest, okay, there will be no EU membership. But this kind of half solution, I mean, it's a big problem. And then that also concerned Ukraine, because Ukraine is a candidate now, and maybe if the Slovak Republic stops it, will open the chapters for negotiations. But I think the German government will say to the German people, yes, we are negotiating, but it will take a long time and will maybe never happen. When it comes to NATO, it's difficult to predict what NATO will be in a couple of years from now. I think there are fundamental changes underway. We are aging welfare societies, so we are not very good at fundamental changes. So we are trying to keep the old, or the facade of the old, as long as possible.
You mean an American-led NATO, being that facade?
Yeah, I mean the facade of the big transatlantic friendship and all of that, but also the facade of NATO being strong and deterring. Look, I mean, we talk about NATO as our deterrence and so on. And then you have the Secretary General Rutte first saying to planes that flew into NATO airspace, well, we waved friendly and then they flew out of the airspace again. Everybody did what they should do. It's fine. NATO is great. And then you have a drone flying into a Romanian block with people living in it. And then he says, NATO is standing on the side of the Romanian. Well, if it would be working, the drone would have been shut down, even if it's just 5 minutes in Romanian airspace. What is this about? Is it about making photos in front of destroyed buildings and then expressing solidarity? So it's not only about the US, it's about the will of NATO to deter
What should
and to
NATO
be
have
taken
done?
and to be taken seriously. And I think it's also about the question, how do we solve the military tasks? Because
But in that instance of the drones, and we should just add some complexities here. Most of these drones that are going into NATO airspace, the governments believe mostly that they have been jammed or that Russians have lost control. They're essentially gliding. Now, it's very difficult to bring down drones in civilian areas that are not at war because the debris can crash into things like residential buildings. So what are the solutions available?
first of all, it says something about NATO and about the ridiculousness of all this military bureaucratic apparatus and the politicians if 4 years into this war we do not have working drone defenses. It's just, I mean, there is no, there's, and I did not,
Ukraine has them.
and I did not even express this radically enough. This is negligence. What are we thinking? I mean, the factories in Tatarstan are chunking out thousands and thousands of drones, and we still take up F-16 jets or F-35 or Patriot batteries to defend against them 4 years into this? And that's why I'm so critical with everybody involved, and I do not believe anything they are telling me. We are ready and we now spend more money and so on, because I see in this simple question just the right things have not been done. That said, I mean, short-range air defense has to start then over Ukrainian airspace. If there is the danger that stuff flying over Ukrainian airspace will fly into Romania or Poland or whatever, start early. And why are we not doing this? What is everybody afraid? That Putin will drop a nuclear bomb on Bucharest if somebody shoots down a bloody Shahed drone over Ismail in Ukraine? Putin will do exactly nothing about this. What are they afraid of? To me, it's super puzzling that every time you suggest something like this, expand air defense over the Ukrainian airspace is just one example. Then they say, oh, we are afraid of escalation. I mean, bloody hell, Putin is shooting ballistic missiles into a European city. What kind of escalation are we talking about?
But it would be NATO involvement, and that is a red line, isn't it? If NATO military equipment were to be used across the border in Ukraine, that would signal
let's be adult people here. What does it mean? Yeah, I mean, from the Russian propaganda side, it's a war against NATO anyway. If it's a self-protection of the Romanian side, why is it NATO involvement? And then what is the consequence? Will Putin start a war against NATO? Are we so afraid of him that we are not?
It's not about being afraid. I mean, devil's advocate here. It's about unnecessary escalation and risk, isn't it?
What is happening? I mean, sometimes we have to straighten our backs. That's the only way to get out of this. If we are always making ourselves small, it's like when you played outside in the neighborhood. And then sometimes you had to fight with each other, but when the neighborhood kids came, you had to make clear, if you touch one of ours, you get beaten up badly. And to be honest, sometimes, I mean, I was not involved. I just heard about it. But sometimes you had to beat one of the other guys up very badly. And then you had also to cut the tires of his bicycle. And then the message was clear.
Okay, Nico, it sounds like you grew up in a family of 8 kids as well. So from that answer, it sounds like you don't think NATO is a deterrent as strong as it used to be anymore, and that maybe it's not really worth Ukraine joining NATO.
I mean, the biggest failure of deterrence by NATO was not to deter Putin from invading Ukraine in 2022 and not building the deterrence instruments vis-à-vis Putin to stop him from invading Ukraine in 2022. I think that's a big historic mistake. My country, Germany, is very much responsible for that. Other countries in Europe are as well. But we have to keep that historic responsibility in mind. Yeah, we are not just super pragmatic professional party politicians who forget everything that happened yesterday and everything is a new day. I mean, that's the way how policymaking very often works these days. We have a historic responsibility here because we did not stop Putin from this invasion, from this brutal war that changed not only the lives of millions of people, it killed 100,000. It's a big historic dimension. The deterrence issue, I think, has been on the table for quite some time. What does it mean to deter? Deterrence is a form of communication. And I mean, I'm joking about the neighborhood kids, but
you're kind of not as well.
no, but it's an important communicative act. So how do you communicate Putin, don't mess with us? If you mess with us, you will be beaten up. How do you communicate Putin, don't blow up a dam in Ukraine and create mass casualties? Don't not use infrastructures as weapon of mass destructions. What is the consequence of
Don't
that?
attack a dead nuclear plant.
No, and when the Novakhovka dam was blown up by Russians, we knew before, and Western intelligence services knew exactly how the bombs were planted and all of that. Yes, how the bombs were planted, which Russian units were doing this, and so on. Why
didn't we stop them?
Why didn't we stop them? It's a good question. Why didn't we deter it? And then after it, why was there no consequence? And if we are not bringing this logic back of you don't do this, otherwise there will be harsh consequences for you. And if he does something, in that case Putin, we implement the harsh consequences. It will be very hard for it. It will be a slippery slope into the wrong direction all of the time. That means if he violates the airspace, we have to tell him, look, if you violate the airspace again, we will shoot the plane down, and then we have to shoot it down. No, but by the way, I mean, if I am an ordinary citizen, I talk to many people all of the time. Many people believe that's how it works. If you violate our airspace, we shoot you down. It's not that people are afraid of anything. That's the rules. That's what you do. And we don't fly into your airspace. Airspace don't fly into ours. End of story. So what are politicians afraid of? There will be propaganda. There will be some kind of whining from the Russian side for a couple of weeks. In Turkey, when Turkey shut down a Russian jet, I think there was a summer without Russian tourists. But after that, things normalized. But most importantly, Russia never violated Turkish airspace again.
It is a salient lesson. Nico Lange, thank you for joining the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
You've been listening to Latika Takes with me, Latika Berg. You can find my work at latikambirk.com and this podcast where you find all your podcasts. See you next time.